Episode 89, The New Human. Hi, this is Ruth Elizabeth Hancock, and welcome to Work Your Energy podcast. And I'm really excited to introduce an amazing guest this week. This is Mary Rodwell, the author of numerous books, including The New Human, and also hypnotherapist working with people who have experienced extraterrestrial contact. So, hi, Mary, how are you?
I'm good, Ruth. Lovely to meet you.
Yeah, lovely to meet you as well. And I've been working through your book. It's just incredible. I mean, really incredible. You know, for someone that's not open-minded and doesn't sort of have any understanding, of extraterrestrial and experiences or, even the presence of extraterrestrial, I think it must be mind-blowing for people to read. It's just amazing the amount of case studies that you have in your book, and talking about the different children and how they're so aware and awake and connected to their past lives on different planets, different solar systems. And I wanted to really try and explore more around this today, looking at the physical genetic evidence behind it, because this I find really fascinating, because this is evidence that we can see. And of course, the thing about humans at the moment is that they all want to see stuff before they can believe it. So, and in particular, I wanted to talk about the genetic changes. So you were just talking about Dr. William Brown, and talking about the evidence of genetic splicing, and just say what you were saying before, because I think that was so interesting what you were saying.
Well, if you go deeper into my background, I was a nurse and a midwife many, many, many years ago. So I've needed the tangibility, 3D side of things, because to me, that's important. We can't always take things on trust just because we're hearing certain things. We want something that's tangible that we can connect to. And the tangibility of this is going back to Dr. Francis Crick, the co-founder of the DNA molecule, who himself said that they had engineered our species. And he went on to explain that it's so complex, the nature of our DNA, that it had to be an intelligent design. Now, when we look at the background of that, we had Neanderthals, Cro-Magnon, etc. We have a missing link. And then out of the blue comes Homo sapiens sapiens with twice the brain size, with 223 genes that are a sideways insertion of genetic material that no one can explain. We have what's known as DNA that they can't work out what it does. They called it junk litter because they couldn't find out. 5% they knew what it did, 5 to 10%, but the rest they said, well, we don't really know what that does. So that's the mystery. What went with that was, as I was looking into the accounts from people having experiences where they knew that they would have their DNA taken by various intelligences and what have you, and they would say that they came to understand through their experiences that they were not just the indigenous to this planet, that there were other intelligences that had put their DNA into Homo sapiens sapiens. And that's yet not been fully decoded. But when you get a molecular biologist like Dr. William Brown, who talks about the evidence that that our DNA has been cut and spliced, etc., and there is a new upgrade of humans, indigos, star children, etc., you've got that going on. And then in another book, Lloyd Pye, in the intervention theory, actually mentions a whistleblower geneticist that said, it's so obvious that, that the genome's been cut and spliced, he said, but if I talk about it, I'd be hung up from a tree and mocked, because this is what is not being put out to the general community, even though there are many that are aware of it. But we know this, this truth embargo, not just on the true nature of who we are, but on many other subjects. We've got hidden archaeology, where we're not told the truth about our ancient origins, and that we could have civilizations many millions of years before our own. This kind of thing. You put together as a researcher, and it starts to paint a picture of, okay, so who are these intelligences that have interfered with our DNA, as Dr. Francis Crick mentions, that we're intelligently designed. And then you look all the way through history of the number of visitors to this planet that were seen as gods, that were interpreted as gods, but had the technology and the awareness to do this. And there's many mythologies about the gods interfering and creating humans. And I think even in Genesis, you've got the same thing where that, and we created them to be like us and be like us. Well, who is us? So I covered that as much as, without getting too in depth, to give a baseline to what we're now heading to as a species, as a new human, upgrade humans, and humans that are becoming more and more activated and aware of their origins.
Yeah, so this activation, so I'm understanding that DNA activation is an energetic thing as well as a physical thing, isn't it? So we are being activated now, I think, on a faster speed as well. So these changes are coming through on a very fast level, enabling us to move into this new human. And this is what Dr. Ohlson calls letter people. So your hypothesis is that these letter people coming in, people with ADHD, and my son and my husband both have ADHD, and we do homeschooling here. And so these people they basically have got genetic differences, which has changed the way that they, if you like, connect or relate to 3D reality.
Absolutely. With my work with those that have had some form of extraterrestrial interaction, of some form of contact and what have you. And this I found was an intergenerational kind of link, so that if I had a lady or a gentleman who's had experiences, I often discovered when I talked to them that either one parent or another had the possibility of having experiences too. They might say, oh, granddad was always into UFOs, or this kind of thing, where the interest was there. And it might be it might be the maternal side, it might be the paternal side, but it might even be both. What intrigued me was there seemed to be more and more openness each generation. And then you would get to the newer generations, from 2000 particularly upwards, where more and more people had their children being given labels that more or less implied they were dysfunctional more than anything else, rather than the fact there might be something else going on. And I remember trying to work out, so what is, if we are being gradually activated and woken up, why is there this way of interpreting the changes as a dysfunction? And what I discovered was that they're given these labels: ADHD, Aspergers, some forms of autism, dyslexia. And the sense came in is maybe they're wired differently. And that's why they appear dysfunctional. And what's interesting with ADHD, the only way they can get them functional is to slow them down to a point where they can be programmed. And so what I came to the conclusion, and it's my opinion, the reason for that is that these intelligences want now a higher operating human system for their more multidimensional abilities. And so they've given them a different kind of brain wiring. They call it neurodivergent, as one name that they're giving them. But instead of being how it's understood as a dysfunction, perhaps what we're missing is they are a different type of human, a human that is operating at a higher level. And one of the clues to that was when I was talking to a gentleman who was Neil Gold in Hong Kong, who is an experiencer. He's had many years of contact. And he wrote the book Close Encounters of the ADHD Kind. And what he said was he'd always noticed he saw a greater reality, a multidimensional reality. He could see more than it appeared his peers. And he said to me, he actually retranslated it, always dialed into higher dimensions, because he was seeing that was the ability he had, that it wasn't a dysfunction. It's only seen as a dysfunction by the so-called norms that we're used to on this planet, without realizing that the whole species is going through a transformation of consciousness. And there is going to be more and more of these labels given out, because actually they're not dysfunctional, they're just wired differently. And they're being prevented from being programmed into an old paradigm, the 3D paradigm, which is limited and limiting. And many of us have experienced that. And we know that what we're taught of reality isn't accurate in modern psychology. It's only saying that your physical senses are to be relied on, when we all are finding out and realize that our sensings of knowing, feeling, that intuition, and all these other senses, if they're not shut down, we start to operate in a multidimensional fashion, and sensing presences, telepathic information, connecting to the various spiritual realms is actually a normal part of our, if you like, it's who we are as a humanity. It is part of our humanness, but it's been stemmed or shut down or blocked or interpreted in a negative way over the last few hundred years, particularly in Western society.
Yes, I can see that. And I can see definitely that we're being interfered with, which I actually talk about in my first book. I can see that it makes, when you look at quantum physics, when you look at where quantum physics is going, it makes perfect sense that we are multidimensional. Of course, we're not one-dimensional in the way that we are led to believe. And I wonder, so it's interesting that you say that this has been definitely more prevalent in the past 100 to 200 years, because I'm researching now for my next book, and I have kept asking myself, it feels like, there has been more and more interference, but when did this start, which you've just answered, and why did this start? Why has it been more prevalent in the past 100, 200 years? What changed?
What changed to upgrade humans, you mean, or
what changed to start dumbing us down even more than we had been in the past? Because I know there's evidence of us being dumbed down, but I'm wondering, why does it feel like it's gone so much faster? I mean, just from the 1940s, with the changing of the solfeggio frequencies, by Rockefeller. Hitler as well, just before the war, to create a more aggressive environment, just things like this. And you can just see that these changes have massively escalated. Is that maybe because we're moving towards this new positive world? And, they've been trying to keep us dumbed down. Yeah. Keep us in the old paradigm, the old way of thinking.
Well, whether people want to believe this or not, it's entirely up to them how informed they wish to get. But I believe that for many centuries, we've slowly been controlled and more controlled by certain groups that are really into controlling the population into, if you like, a manageable way where they can actually do exactly what they want, whether you call those elite, lots of different names they're given, from Illuminati to the elite or whatever, but there's a certain percentage of humanity that want to control everybody else, and it's power, it's greed or whatever. And what they don't want is the rest of humanity to wake up and actually perceive what's going on, because then they will challenge it. So there's been more and more protocols to dumb down the population. And there's lots of things now, and I'm getting into the conspiracy side of it because you can't avoid it. Our food has been poisoned. Our water's been poisoned. We have our air has been poisoned. And I now fully believe that a lot of those so-called vaccines are poisoned. And I've got more and more evidence for that. And I'm an ex-nurse who was very much into believing in the whole vaccine programs, until I realized that that's another way that they can contaminate and make us ill. There's lots of other things that go with that. And it's the only way they can dumb us down is through these kinds of protocols and propaganda, and even to limit what we know about ourselves, including our the anthropological history, the archaeological history, which we're only allowed to know a certain amount, and a lot of that is edited. Our science has been manipulated. Our biological science has been manipulated. We are given the wrong understanding about our biology and what actually, all the natural processes of healing and what have you have been slowly taken away. And this is a deliberate program to keep this Homo sapiens sapiens from manifesting its potential. This is the way, some of the ways they're doing it.
Yes, as a collective. So as a collective, we are far more powerful because in terms of energy fields and energy pendulums, as I call them, from, Vadim Zealand, in terms of the energetic aspect of our world, we as a collective can energetically shift things so fast. And we just need to wake up to this because we are the majority. I know that many people do not believe that this has been on a conscious, that we haven't been interfered with on a conscious or purpose level. I feel that it has been on a purpose level, that it has been purposely done. And I can see that, it obviously makes a lot of sense to people to control the masses. It makes it, far more easier for them to or people to control us. We're now 8 billion people. It's hard to control 8 billion people. So yeah, I can see that definitely we have been interfered with. I'm actually now wondering if this is going to start improving, because I do feel myself that many of these dark energies are leaving the planet, and I feel them leaving. I see them leaving when I'm doing my meditations. And I'm wondering now, will this enable us to wake up much faster?
Well, I agree with you. I agree there has to be a tipping point where we get to where we're no longer in that dark place where we can't see what's going on. And the interesting thing with what's happened over the last few years, despite the chaos and the things that have occurred, which, sometimes I think they're unimaginable, unbelievable, because they're so dark. But at the same time, what it's done is it's forced people to stop and take note of what's going on, to finally realize what's important in their lives, to look at their mortality and change the way that they are. And the numbers of people contacting me that have been awakened to all of this in the last few years because of what's happened has been incredible. And so there's been something that I don't think was allowed for when they started this program, was that there were going to be more people that actually see through the veil of what's going on and the propaganda and all the rest of it, and suddenly realizing how much they've been manipulated. And the children being born in the last 20 years, they're already there. They can already see through a lot of this because they're already awake. They can tell when people are lying to them. They can tell when there's untruths and what have you. So they're already seeing it. So they get dumbed down in other ways. They try and get them hooked into technology, or they try and get them hooked into medications or drugs or alcohol and all these kinds of things as a way of stopping them from accessing the information. But people also need to know that when, some of the most famous UFO crashes, for example, like the Roswell one or what have you, there has been technology gained from many of these crashed craft and from these intelligences that will give us free energy, new healing techniques, a whole range of other technologies that would change this planet forever, get rid of the pollution. We won't even need fossil fuels. And it's all been hidden by a certain group that don't want this to be available because of greed, because of power, and because of a lot of other things that it gives them access to. If people knew how much of this could be cleaned up, and you could literally power your home with a bit of equipment that's maybe this big for the rest of your life without it costing you another penny, just imagine how that would change lives. But you're not given it. And this is part of the truth embargo, and the reason why many are being contacting me now and saying, I feel I need to speak up. I need to talk about my experiences. I need to write books on my experiences. And I believe disclosure is going to happen like that. Not what the dear old governments want to just give you, there are lights in the sky. We're not quite sure what they are. Rubbish, because they fully know what they are. But it's going to come from credible individuals that are having experience and writing their stories and telling their stories. And this is happening exponentially now. I mean, in terms of my own work, where I might get half a dozen emails a week, it's a day sometimes now that I'm getting new. These are people that may have never spoken about it all their lives. And Dr. Lara Ohlson, the reason she came out of the space closet was because of the mantis being she was connected to. she asked the question, should I start speaking my truth now and talking about this? And she had an instant healing by these particular intelligences that said, yep, now it's time. And she's taking a big risk, because in Scandinavia, there are things that they would see not much worse than actually having ET contact. And to give you an example of how toxic it can be in places like that, when I was in Stockholm, I spoke to a 28-year-old young man who had he said, I was with friends and I started to speak this light language. And they got so freaked out, they called the police and they called an ambulance. So they thought he was going crazy. And this is, a few years ago. So this is how they're controlling the narrative, controlling people's experiences, because they're making them terrified of owning up to their experiences, because you could end up hospitalized, you could end up looking as though you're crazy, and people around you often will distance themselves because they don't know what to do about it. So you are stuck in this isolation. And are you going to talk about it then? It's much, much harder and takes a lot of courage.
Yeah, I agree with that, definitely. And I think that this fear factor is keeping the vibration of the planet so much lower than it should be by now. And that's why, I really want people to step out of fear more. And I talk a lot about raising our vibration, and it really, I know it sounds like some sort of naff Instagram post to so many people, but it really is about raising our vibration, because we need to get beyond these low vibrational frequencies so that we can start creating a newer, higher vibrational world, so that, more people can thrive.
Well, this is happening, I think, despite what is being put out. And it's all about transcending fear. As a shaman, and anyone who does any shamanic work, the first thing they've got to do is transcend their human fears so they can operate in a multidimensional reality. Well, what is being put out is this fear blanket that's saying, stay at home, don't do anything, everything's out to get you. And that is the prison. The fear has created the prison. So are you going to live the rest of your life like that, thinking erroneously you're going to be safe? Or are you going to say, I'm not going to be tied to a fear frequency. I'm going to own who I am and to step past that. And that's what I'm seeing more and more, is people being unafraid to say, this is not for me. I don't want it for myself. I don't want it for my children. I certainly don't want it for my grandchildren, because this is what humanity is faced with right now, is, do we want a beautiful future for our children and grandchildren and the other future generations? Or are we going to let ourselves be put in a box by a very small minority of individuals that think they can put us in that box?
Yes, and possibly these individuals, their bloodlines link back to the Anunnaki, the original Anunnaki, who I suspect took or deleted, eliminated the third strand of DNA that we had. And I know that you talk about this in your book. I just want to ask you a question. So if we are moving into a 3 DNA strand, and there is a boy in the UK, Alfie Clamp, who already has 3 DNA strands, yeah? And how does this fit with the 12th strand? So the 12 DNA helix. Does that mean that we are moving to 12 and we still have more to go? Or does that mean that we are... Okay, so then when the Anunnaki took away the 3rd strand of DNA, where were the other 9 strands? Where were they? Did we not have them activated at that point? I mean, you may not know the answer to this.
All I know is that we have everything we need within our DNA. We have to understand that it's also holographic as well. And so we may not be fully aware of that. What has come to me as different sources is that we have everything we need to be part of our galactic community, if you like, that it's all in our DNA.
Yeah.
What's happening is, with the frequencies that are hitting the planet now, and what we're being exposed to, is gradually activating those particular aspects of DNA that belong to our star heritage, whether it's Orion, Sirius, Arcturus, Andromeda, or whatever, or others. And the evidence of that is how many are identifying as being hybrids and will actually say, I feel I'm Pleiadian, or I feel like I'm from this or whatever, which means that part of their DNA has been activated and they're recognizing that part of their star origin or whatever. Interestingly, even the children have talked about this. And one little girl told me that she was a hybrid and that she was part human, part water being, and even drew the water being. And actually said that she's brought the water being in with her human self. That's how she identifies as a hybrid. So she's brought in the awareness of the water being and what have you. So I'm getting it not just from adults that are saying they're hybrids and owning to the fact that they are hybrids, but we're even getting the children connecting to that and bringing in their awareness of their other lives and what have you. Because with that awareness comes the abilities that come from that particular origin as well, which they're bringing to the planet to help. And one young man told me, he was 10 years old, and he said that on his other planet, he was a blue being. But he said he's come to this planet for the first time. His mother has been here many times, so that's why he chose her. He's a very first time as a human. He said, I'm a center seed, and I connect to the center of the planet, and I'm going to be helping with all the pollution. That was his mission, and how he understood it. So this is what I mean. It is quite astounding and astonishing how much these new generations of human are awake to who they are, what they're here for, what the mission is, and, owning their heritage, their galactic heritage.
I think that's beautiful. And I think, that has been, I think, probably one of the biggest sources of depression and mental health issues in this world to date, is that people don't know why they're here. They don't know what they're supposed to be doing. They feel lost. They have no sense of purpose, and we obviously, we talk about finding our purpose and all those sorts of things. But, I think it's so wonderful that people are coming in now and knowing this, because then they know what they're here for. And I've never really quite bought into the whole karma thing. I think it doesn't make logical sense to me. I've never believed that we come here to struggle, and to go through like hell and fire, to make amends for our past wrongs or anything like that. I do feel that we come here in order to help. And I think it's really great that people have this sort of this feeling, this purpose, that they know what they're coming here for. I know what your thoughts are on that. I mean, I do think that karma is something that's been fabricated by the 3D matrix, and I don't think it's real.
I've only can go on doing a lot of work with past lives. And one of the interesting things that came up with the past lives, apart from the in-between lives and soul journey and what have you, is that often when I've taken them through a particular past life to the death sequence, and then them seeing themselves as, their essence, their soul afterwards. And I might, and I'll say to them, so what did you learn in that life? And they may say, well, I learned about compassion, or I learned about limits, or I learned about this. I didn't do so well, maybe in this, and this, which, maybe I might explore at another time. But there was no judgment in that. It was more of what they gained in awareness and understanding from that experience. And then the same thing with choosing this life. They will talk about choosing their mother and father and the siblings and what they can teach them through an experience. So it's a bit like a spiritual adventure, and it's giving them an opportunity to make choices about how they choose to view their experiences. For example, what I say is what I believe the choice is. The choice is whether you choose to see it from a victim perspective, or whether you choose to see the silver lining and say, what is pretty tough, but through that, I got to understand more of this, and this. So that I've seen it very much as a soul adventure that is exploring different experiences and different choices to gain more awareness and connection to us all, because we're all connected to one another. So I believe it's to the collective source of what we are, or who we are, universal source, whatever name you want to give that, because it's more about an exploration of different choices and different experiences. That's how I've come to understand it.
Yes, I can relate to that, definitely. And that reminds me of something that I'm always saying in my group programs to the people, is that allow life to unfold. And that's exactly what you just said. Life is an adventure. And unfortunately, because of the low vibrations, the fear factor of our world, people are not empowered to embrace this adventure because they're so scared of what's going to come next, because they've experienced so much struggle and suffering that they don't want to, even take another step on the road. But as you rightly say, life is an adventure. I do agree that all adventure is learning. Everything is learning. Yeah. And I just think it's really nice for people to have that purpose. I know that for myself, I really struggled my whole life finding my purpose, finding more meaning. I had depression for like 45 years. I just was sort of just devoid of, I just felt numb. And I think I'm very driven to help people never to feel like that. I feel very strongly that as a species, we need to reach our full potential. And for me, multidimensionality is our full potential.
Well, I think it's what makes sense of the 3D world and what's happened in the Western world, not so much in indigenous tribes where they're open to both sides of their awareness, not just the 3D, but the multidimensional. We've had that plugged, if you like, or erased as valid. So most of us that are programmed in the Western mindset, we're really going around with one eye closed because we're only using this to try and interpret our experience. You can't do that because you need both eyes to understand 3D reality and a multidimensional reason behind why these things happen, because it's both that create our experience. If you're closed to part of you that is it helping you to understand, then nothing makes sense. What do you get? Depression.
Yeah, I can see that. And I can see, so many people who have depression shouldn't have it. It's that lack of connection to their spiritual side. And in fact, some of the research I'm reading at the moment is all about the left and right brain and how, and I think it's Dr. Teresa Bullard, I think her name is, from Gaia. And she talks about how depression is that we don't have that connection to the right brain, that we're too left brain in everything that we do. And because we don't have that, so our brains need to work all together, left and right together. Yeah. And we're just working from this left side. And we don't have that connection to the right, which of course is the intuition, the creativity, all these sorts of things. So even if you're not at the level that we're talking about now, spirituality could be seen just simply as the right side of our brain.
Well, it's something that I talk about a great deal, particularly with those that are having their awareness activated. And I will ask them whether or not they're seeing energy or feeling energy. They see orbs, or if they feel presences and what have you. Because are they having information in their head they haven't consciously learnt, for example, because that's all downloads and whatever. What it's saying is they're experiencing multidimensionality, but not fully understanding how to work with it because they've never been given the tools to do so. And because a lot of people are waking up, they're starting to feel presences, they're starting to get synchronicities, they're starting to get knowings and precognition and all these kind of things. But they don't know, well, how do I manage that? How do I put it together so that it's useful to me and have confidence in it? So often in my work is helping them to understand how it works. In other words, giving them an operating system. So they've got the new car that, that looks, shiny and bright, and they know that it can drive them to where they need to go, but they still don't know where the ignition is. And what do they do with the steering wheel, and how does it all work and come together so they're safe on the road? A lot of my work is about showing them how that all works, because I said, once you have that, you've got your grounding, which you need, but you need to work in harmony, not separately, but in harmony with your 3D and your multidimensional, because all day we can be going from one to the other, where we're understanding from a logical, analytical side, but also from our intuition and that knowing that's saying this isn't right. Why isn't it right? It just doesn't feel right. And how many dismiss that because, oh, well, I've got no way of giving that tangibility, but you end up finding out it's absolutely accurate. So why are you dismissing it when that's your multidimensional self giving you what needs to happen or what you need to know?
Yeah, and I talk about this in my book because I relate it to the brain waves, because I'm trying to give some people something tangible to hang on to, so the beta brain waves of the 3D, the alpha brain waves, the 4D, the theta brain waves, the 5D. And I very much, and then of course beyond that is higher consciousness. And we already know that our brain waves, we're dipping in between beta, alpha, theta all the time. Theta is the self-healing and the miracle brain wave. So we already have proof that this is happening. Getting to the gamma and all of that. I think that takes meditation to get to those points, but possibly not for the new children coming in.
Well, what's interesting with them, they can access a lot of these abilities quite consciously. Many of them are saying they're an empath or they're a healer and already doing it. They just do it in their conscious state. We still think that we have to be in a certain state to access certain things. Ultimately, we won't need to. Ultimately, we'll just be able to go to where we need to be, like turning the volume on an old radio, we just, okay, I need to be in that frequency for this, or I need to be in that frequency. And it will be automatic. It will be part of our activation and what have you. And this is what we've got to look forward to. It isn't just the kids that will be doing this. I say even the older models like me, I said, we'll have that available to us. It might take us a little longer to get to the particular point that they've got to, but it is there for all of us. But the one thing I remember, one star kid when she was 9, she lives in Sweden, and she said, Mary, she said, human beings are amazing. They don't even have any idea how amazing they are, but they've got to believe it first. And this is the thing. Belief is, let's face it, what you are programmed almost from the beginning is, you're not, you can't do this, you can't do that, you might be stupid and all the rest of it. And if you're religious, you're a sinner, right from the word go. You haven't got any choice in that. You're a sinner right away. So you're on a loser to begin with, with all these different messages that you've got to have this to be considered worthwhile, or you've got to have that awareness to be considered, or you've got to have that piece of paper to be considered worthwhile. We have all these messages telling us we're useless. Everyone knows more than us. And we're really not good people as well. We're probably, full of parts of ourselves that are not acceptable or whatever because we think differently or because of what. That's the messages that, we're getting even in school. You're not good enough for this, or you're not good enough for that. You're not fast enough for this, or you're not fast enough for that. You're very stupid, aren't you, or whatever. We've all had it. We've had it through school, and it's not just the kids saying it to you either. We have many teachers that's how they teach, is they think they're encouraging you to do better. All they're doing in many cases is creating a very depressed, sad child who thinks they're never going to get anywhere anyway.
I know, that's why we left mainstream school. My son was just completely, his confidence was so low, and both children were doing so badly in the curriculum, but I could see that they're actually very intelligent children. And it didn't make sense to me that they were both doing so badly in school. And I also feel now they're doing an online platform, but again, I feel, because I listen to what they're being taught, and I think that it's still dumbing them down. It's still so wrong. And, and half the teachers look depressed out of their minds anyway, which is not a nice vibration, because as you rightly say, these new children, they're all of a higher vibration. So anything that's lower vibration is not going to be a match for them. And it's just going to pull them down into depressive states, I think.
I often have parents with these children from various ages saying they're not doing well at school, they're very unhappy, they're considered they're not capable or whatever. And it's not just parents. There's been some clinical psychologists that have worked with these children, and they recognize they're the new ones because they're star seeds themselves and have recognized it. And, I get calls all the time from parents saying, and one parent very recently was talking about her daughter and saying that if she gets sent back to school again, she says she's going to end it. She's just going to end. She can't go back to school. She can't face with it. And she says, I don't know what to do because, we've had all the different experts and all the rest of it. And I said to her, well, if going to school means that, then she's going to have to be allowed to do whatever it is from home, isn't she? While she is feeling this way, because there is something very dark in the school that makes her feel that she wants to end it or whatever. And it is that serious. People don't realize that, kids can really profoundly react to some of the things that are going on in certain of the schools. Some, schools are better than others, without any doubt. I think the Steiner school has a little bit more openness to creativity and that kind of awareness. If you can, get your kid to, not all of them are, there's some better than others, but they seem to have a bit more openness to creativity and supporting from a more spiritual level and what have you. But really, we need a complete rehash of how we support these new generations. And I've always said it's like creating an environment that is supporting and loving and allowing them to tell us and teach us what they most need to be all they've come here to be. So we'll be the ones that will be learning from them how best to support them and how best to help them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I just wanted to come back to what you were talking about earlier with the star child, because I thought this was very interesting. So the star child they've done DNA sequencing on it, have they?
Not in the way that we look at it, or as far as I know, they may very well have done, but we certainly haven't heard anything about it. But there has been evidence, and it's a story that was to do with, I think, some hospital in California, where the story goes, and I'm sure this isn't the only one, I'm not sure whether I put it in the book or not, was there was a young boy who was born, his mother had HIV. So when he was born, they were testing him regularly for the fact that, it had been passed on to him. And they found something quite extraordinary. When he got to about 5 or 6, suddenly it was eradicated. There was no more HIV. And they couldn't work this out. How is it that suddenly he's cured and whatever? And they looked into his DNA and they found that instead of the 20 codons that were part of this, he had 24. And they realized that it was those extra 4 that enabled him to self-heal. And I think they worked out there was about 3% of the population has these 24 codons rather than 20. So what is that saying? That's saying certainly something is going on, even if we are not being made aware of it. And I do think certain organizations are aware of it, because look at the DNA collection that's going on and has been going on for several years now. I believe that they know exactly what they're looking for. Exactly. And that's probably freaking them out a little bit, because I believe there's a huge number now that are manifesting this kind of upgrade. And I don't get access to laboratories and what have you. I would love to be able to explore more of this, but there is a lot of testimony from various people that have said, and one of them is a lovely lady who is an academic, who said that a friend of hers looked at her DNA and whatever, and was so frightened by what he saw that he said, I can't look at it anymore. He couldn't explain it or whatever. So she never got to know what it was that he was seeing in her DNA, but he was certainly seeing something that terrified him.
Wow.
That's just one of many cases where there was another one in Western Australia, a family where they basically were told that there was something very unusual with their children's DNA, but they were never, ever told what it was or had it explained to them. So I think when they collect DNA, especially at birth, they're very good at collecting DNA. I would suspect there's a very different kind of DNA database somewhere or in various places that isolates pretty well something that they know to look for that is highlighting these children. I've got no way of proving that. All I can say is there's many ways to collect DNA these days. And, everything's about DNA, isn't it?
Yes, I know. And funnily enough, in my meditations, I keep hearing this voice in my head saying, it's the DNA, it's the DNA. And so I've been exploring as much sort of research as I can around DNA. But of course, it's a massive area. And so much of it, I think, is just suppressed. So is very hard to try and find this, to try and find more information out. And then that's why I was very pleased to read your book, because you reference quite a few things in here from geneticists, scientists. I know Dr. Robert Davis was talking about the frequencies from other dimensions and how we are actually already geared to interpret these frequencies from other dimensions. And I thought that was interesting, because that's channeling, isn't it? That's downloading, channeling information, which, as I said before, I worked with a shaman and learned how to channel. And, I find it very, very interesting. Don't understand it really, but I find it very interesting. And we can access, I think, more data, more information from that point. And because of the suppression that's going on in our world, I think it's important to be able to have that channeled information as well, because if you like, you're going beyond the 3D world and getting access to more information. But this brings me back to something that we were talking about before, which is that he talks about how truth resonates with truth, and which he then goes on to explain is our knowing feeling, is when we intuitively know something and we just know something is true. And certainly I know many people who are listening to this will already be struggling with that in their life, that they cannot prove something, but they know it's true. And, they'll be surrounded by people who are saying to them, well, you can't prove it, it's not true. But this Dr. Robert Davis is saying that actually we can see that truth resonates with truth. So in this 3D matrix, 3D reality, we have absolute truth and relative truth. Absolute truth does not exist, but we can find our own absolute truth through resonance.
And that's been part of my work, is helping people to access their own resonance, to trust their own resonance, and whether or not they see that truth coming to them from other sources, higher realms or whatever, spirit guides or other intelligences, or whether they interpret it as their higher self, their oversoul, superconscious hope. Either way, it doesn't really matter how they interpret it, if what they're getting resonates and makes sense. And one of the things that we have to do now is, because of this, we live in an information matrix now of all sorts of different data that's coming to us from all different levels. How do you discern what is the truth, or your truth connecting to the truth that you are hearing about or whatever? You've only got one thing, and that's a knowing or a sensing or a feeling or a resonance to this information rather than that information, what have you. Because ultimately, there's no one out there who's going to be the ultimate guru that's going to say to you, I've got all the truth, here you are, have it, because that's a nonsense, because nobody has. The only thing you've got, and I believe we're born with the tools we need to get through this adventure that we call human life. We are born with the tools we need, but we've lost confidence in them. We've lost trust in our own tools and resonance to truth and our knowing and our sensing and our feeling. And this is what now we have to go back to, even though it's scary for you to take responsibility for your own truth rather than rely on other people, because that's disempowering you ultimately. We have to take responsibility for our own resonance to truth and what we choose to accept as that, because that is the ultimate responsibility. It's, but it's also the self-empowerment that you are saying, I know I can do this because we all can. And that's very important to me, to assist those that are perhaps still having needing a bit more assistance to feel that sense and trust in their own selves and whatever they feel they're connected to, whether it's spirit guides, angels, religious figures, ascended masters, whatever, light beings, mantis being, whatever it is that they see as a source of information that comes through with information to help them understand what's going on and to help them with their own personal journey.
So these archetypes that we see in our own mind, are these real then? Or is this how our mind translates the frequencies, the energies that, that come into our brain from the quantum field, if you like?
Well, it could be either. I think that what we do is we create a way of interpreting certain things in our experience and reality. For example, we may connect to a spirit guide that looks like, I don't know, a lion being or whatever. And that's what they're presenting to you. It may or may not be that form, although it may be. And they're saying, I'm your spirit guide or whatever. What is important there is, does that being give you awareness and information that makes sense to you or helpful to you in any way? It doesn't matter if ultimately it's just energy and it's just an intelligence. So for me, it's where every different person I work with is, what is your way of working? What is your way of perceiving reality? How do you understand your intuition? How do you understand the source of your information? And that is what I'm going to that I'll work with them. Okay, you feel that there's not spirit guides or there's not angels for you. It's your higher self helping you do this. Okay, so we work through the higher self. So it really depends on how some of them will say, well, I feel this isn't my only reality, that I have other realities in parallel universes, different timelines, different, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So how do you want to understand more of that and how it helps you understand your reality now? It doesn't really matter to me how they put it together, as long as I've got an idea of helping them work through it to gain the information and help an understanding that they're seeking. How they interpret it is fine. I just find out what it is and say, right, well, that's what we're going to work with then. So it's more about working with their individual perception of reality that is their spiritual guidance, if you like. And for some, it may be Jesus and Mary, it may be the saints. It doesn't matter. It's, do they trust that source? Do they trust that frequency to give them truth, to give them understanding, to give them the knowledge that they're seeking to make sense of their world?
Yeah. So it's just simply expanding consciousness out of their own space and connecting to consciousness. I know consciousness is everything. It's interesting because, I know that you talk to, there's a little boy in your book, who says that he comes from the mantid family. And when he dies, he'll go back to this family. So is this his interpretation of this reality, if you like, or is this another aspect of him living in that reality within his multidimensional self?
It could be actually that. The understanding is that he's very connected to that particular frequency, which he calls his ancestors, the mantis, and that he'll be a mantis again when he leaves this planet. What's interesting is that he talked about going on the craft sometimes and evaporating into a mantis form. And this is not the only time I've heard that. I've heard others say that they've gone into another form on board craft and then gone back to their human form and reanimated it, if you like an avatar, So he connects to that form even through his experiences now as part of who he is, part of his DNA. So for him, it's very real. It isn't just a fantasy. It is real and tangible to him. And so you have to honor that. The thing is, what I say, Ruth, is you don't know, in terms of our reality, you don't know what you don't know. You learn more by listening to the amazing accounts of experience and reality, which should expand you to understanding how limited each one of us really is compared to the matrix of consciousness that we're dealing with and what have you. I get a veterinary surgeon that I worked with in Chile, and she wrote to me recently and said, Mary, I now can hear what the animals that are brought to me are saying, so I can convey that to their owners. So now they can tell me what's wrong or how they're going, and I can then pass that on. But she says the ones that have died, I can do that too, because they'll come in and I can convey their messages to their owners and whatever. Here is a veterinary surgeon that's basically saying she can talk to the animals, and not only the animals that are alive, but the ones that are no longer with us. Make of that what you will, but that is not unusual. There are so many people now saying that they can communicate with animals. Children, like that one, the child that says he's connected to the mantis, he communicates with animals. So do you say they're all crazy? Or do you say maybe that's an ability we all have, just some of us haven't refined it or have the ability yet to connect to that the animal consciousness or whatever. Those that are talking to trees, and plants and what have you. Do we say, oh, that's a load of rubbish just because I can't do it? Or do we say, is that really a property perhaps that we have that we haven't yet awakened in our own ability and awareness? I always go back to this film, Lucy, and I don't know whether you've seen the film Lucy. I know they're using chemicals to activate her DNA and what have you, but what happens with Lucy as more and more of her DNA gets activated? She becomes more and more expanded, more and more multidimensional. And I believe that's a real indicator of where we are going. And the reason I say that is many of them also get downloads of programs that they can't decode. They'll say, I had all this downloading of information, but I can't understand it. I don't know how to decode it. I don't know how to interpret it. And I was, hold on, this is a bit strange. Why would intelligences download information that you can't use or activate or understand or decode, unless they know that at some point you're going to need it? You're going to need the new software for the activated human. And I believe that's why it's there, because nothing is, to me, it's illogical otherwise. And I don't think any of this is illogical. I think there's a purpose. We just don't always realize what the purpose is. And I suspect, well, one of the interesting things an experiencer said to me many years ago, she said some of these symbols, for example, that people have downloaded, she said they may just see something that looks like a question mark or a circle and a dot or something. She said what they don't realize is that is multidimensional information, that if you unpacked it, she said it's a bit like the word Christmas. If you look at the word Christmas, what does that activate in terms of understanding? Christmas trees, Father Christmas, Christmas dinner, parcels, presents. You think of all the things just that one word activates in terms of how we understand Christmas. She said, it's a bit like that. And she said, one symbol contains as much information as a room full of encyclopedias. And we're just seeing a symbol, just manifested all these symbols, but I don't know what they are.
Yes, and I talk about this in one of the chapters of my new book, actually, and looking at the energetic frequencies, and as you say, the information behind the hieroglyphics, and also Freddie Silver talks about the crop circles and how these crop circles were possibly put into our planet, put onto our Earth in order to upgrade all of our consciousness, because our consciousness has definitely been upgrading on an energetic level, and it's now, I think, at a very high level, for many, many people. And so they must have had a way that they were able to do this. And so putting symbology around the world, and of course, with all the ancient sites as well, a huge amount of symbols everywhere. And the hieroglyphs as well. And they contain those energetic memories, that energetic data information. So these downloads that the children are downloading could also be that they are contributing towards raising the vibration of the planet through this energetic downloads that they're getting, rather than actually having to understand what the symbols mean. It's that energetic frequency that they're putting down onto paper, because once it's down on paper, then it's there in physical form. And I think it can create possibly more impact in that physical form.
I've no doubt that that's the purpose of it as well, including our own frequencies and language, and the frequencies even of the children are also working that way. I always remember, and, I sort of connect to my team, as it were. And they told me once, Mary, even your voice has a frequency to activate and what have you. And I said, it's going out there, or just it's going out there. And I said, oh, come on, give me a break, being very English and saying, come on, what we're like, you don't big note yourself in England, do you? And I said, oh, that sounds a little bit too much for me to swallow and what have you. So always they prove to me what they're telling me. And I was in an expo, and I was part of a panel, and I actually was sitting there, and I wasn't speaking at the time. And a woman stood up in the audience and she said, I've got to say this to you, Mary. She said, you're sitting there and you're not really saying very much, but you're beaming out all these frequencies, she says to the audience. And I thought I ought to tell you that I'm feeling them. And I just sat there gobsmacked, because it was only a week prior to that's what I'd been told. And I think everyone who's on these frequencies, whoever they are on the planet, are doing the same thing. But I think without question, as you raise your frequency and you're interacting with people, they are picking that up and it's activating others.
Funnily enough, my guide said a similar thing, that I need to write and speak, and as I speak, this information, the channeled information, comes out, and I need to do this on a much larger scale than I'm doing now, because I'm a bit shy. But I thought I'll start with a podcast, and I'll write books and get all this information out there. And I think that's why so many people feel called to do that same thing, that we all need to get this information out there, because the information is energetically changing the collective consciousness. And that's what I think people don't understand, that, even one little person sitting at home can make such a huge difference just by speaking and writing and, their truth, because that truth comes out, it creates that resonance, it increases the vibration of the planet. The more of us that do this, I think, is really important.
Well, it's happening, isn't it? Already. Yeah. We're seeing it. I think the powers that be that wanted to shut us all down didn't realize just how much this would actually work for us rather than them, because now more and more people are ever more informed than they've ever been. Whereas where I used to do a conference somewhere, and there might be 300 or 400 or 500 people, and a few of them might take your DVD or whatever and show it to a few friends or whatever. Many times now, that particular presentation could be seen by thousands, because it gets on the internet and people all over the world get to see it, and that's the difference now. So they're getting the information and it's being disseminated more and more. And it's so easy to disseminate it now as well. So this is, I think, was not understood when, this was supposed to be a medium for the lesser, the hierarchy of this planet. They didn't expect that. They didn't expect that this would happen.
No, but I think, again, as you say, I think it's because we are so much more connected to the higher consciousness. And even if we think we can't hear them, we can. We just think it's our own thoughts. So I just think so many more people now are downloading this information, as they sleep during the day. And it's, if you like, it's overriding all the negative energy on the planet, and we just have to just get into that heart space, get into that feeling of love, get into that feeling of that I want to make this world a better place for everybody. And as soon as you're in there, you're downloading streams of higher consciousness information, which is then going to come out through you as you talk with your friends.
That's exactly right. And that's what's so exciting now, is to see how many people are opening up to this that may never have done 5 years ago.
So the other thing, I know I'm taking up all your time here, so I'm just going to ask you one more thing. And I just wanted to go back again to this sort of the thing that Lloyd Pye was talking about. And because he's a very interesting man, and he's obviously researched this a lot. I know that he's no longer with us. It was him, that was talking about the star child skull. Is that correct? Yeah. Yes. And so what did he discover from this star child skull? That it was the mother, the that was human, but the father, the Y chromosome, wasn't. Is that correct, or have I got that wrong?
Well, I'm not absolutely certain now, but I thought actually it was the mitochondrial DNA that proved it wasn't human. He didn't get the final results that he wanted before, unfortunately, he passed away. But I was there when he first showed the skull in, I think it's 2000 in Nevada. And there was a big show of, look what we've got here. Amazing gentleman, so thorough. He had so many tests and what have you. I think there were about 24 points that proved it wasn't human, at least 24 or more now. I can't remember all the details. It's a long time since I read his book, The Intervention Theory, but he went into details all about the star child skull. So anyone who wants more information on that, just go to the website and see for yourself. But I think it was actually proved that the mitochondrial DNA was not human, if I remember rightly. But okay. I could be wrong now because it's been a long time since I've looked at it.
Yeah. And then that also leads with the Maria. So the Maria that Nassim Haramein and William Brown. Yeah. So have they discovered now that this is not human as well?
My understanding is that, yes. I mean, the thing is with a lot of these elongated skulls that have been found all over the world, including England, there are so many anomalies with them. And they tried to say that, that they were skulls were that shape because they bound them to make them that shape. Well, certainly the primitive indigenous tribes did do a lot of that. But the ones that were the elongated ones that were found in Peru, apparently also they had fetuses with the same elongated skull. So this wasn't binding. This was how they were being born as well. And the fascinating thing is nothing is ever really said about the anomalies of these shaped skulls.
I know, they keep it so hidden. It's so infuriating.
Well, the great books to read on some of the hidden archaeology is Michael Crino. And one of his books I know he's got several called Hidden Archaeology, but they found nails in rock that are millions of years old, for example. And they're trying to tell us that we only appeared on the scene, I think, 200 and something odd thousand years ago or something ridiculous or whatever. But it seems from this kind of hidden archaeology, we've been around for maybe many millions of years, or at least some life forms have been, whether they were truly human or not, or part of the hominids or whatever, I don't know. I'm not an expert on that. But what frustrates me, Ruth, more than anything, is that we are lied to on virtually every level of human knowledge. Every level. I'm talking from science to biology to religion to the whole gamut of what is, what we call knowledge that are being taught in higher education or whatever, where there's an edited version of everything, including, of course, as I say, religion, where it is tailored to the particular belief system that suits whoever is running the show. And that is why, we've got so many confused people, because this is what you're taught. And then you're finding something far greater than that. And then you have to say, but why? Why are we being lied to? Why are we being shut down? And that takes you then into the whole thing of what have I incarnated into, to a planet where virtually everything is a lie, it's and that's when I think you have to start facing the reality. The only truth is going to be the one that you seek for yourself and find that resonates and makes sense to you. And I think most of the people that are waking up now, that's exactly what they do. They find they become avid researchers because they want the truth.
Yeah, no, likewise. I'm obsessed with researching and writing my books. And yeah, I totally agree with you. And we actually, my children and I, we started the Nassim Haramein's resonance science course last night.
Okay.
And it was really, really amazing. He was talking about the evidence of advanced civilizations in there. And interestingly, the person I interviewed for my podcast last week on Atlantis, he has said that in the past few days, they have actually now discovered an ancient workshop, like a tool workshop in Ethiopia, which they've dated back 1.3 million years ago.
Wow, there you go.
So, this would have been intelligent hominids of some sort that would have had this workshop.
Yeah.
So, I agree. I think we've been around for millions of years. I'm not too sure what I think about us being wiped out on purpose so many times. Alan Green was speaking last night, and he said that everything is secular, and same way. So everything in nature is so therefore it makes sense that humans are as well. So we reach a point in our civilization and our development, and then something happens and it's wiped out. But I actually rather like Brooks Agnew, who says that this is because of the resonance. We are attracting the lower vibrational destruction matter, if you like, to the planet. I think that one really makes a lot of sense to me. We raise our vibration. We're going to raise our vibration beyond this. And we won't have that level of destruction anymore. We actually will be in a higher vibration, away from all this low density matter.
I think so too. And when people say to me, well, it's not looking good, and I agree that we're at a point where I think with the chaos, and it can be very hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And my argument is this, that there are too many beautiful new souls of awareness, higher awareness coming in with various high mandates and missions. They're not coming in for a waste of time, because that would be illogical, because they would know whether or not it was worth it or not. And if they've chosen to come in, it's because they know that it's going to be worthwhile coming in and helping with the shift. No matter what looks dark at the moment, there's a great deal of light coming in now as well. And it's just not as obvious just yet, but I think it certainly will be.
Yeah. Well, that's a great note to end on. Thank you very much for that. And I totally agree with you. I feel very positive about the future. I really do. And I have been doing for quite a few years now that my depression has gone. So I think, we're moving into an amazing new earth, if you like, new dimension, new existence, however, new reality, perhaps is the best way of saying it. Thank you very much. Okay. All right.
Very much, Prue. Pleasure.